Chaos Impact is here, and it brings with it one major new theme, the Unchained monsters. These devilish fiend monsters are so powerful and so angry that their power spills over to the other side of the field and absorbs your opponent's monsters as link materials. The primary goal of the Unchained deck is to let your opponent play their best monster and then snatch it out from under their feet with your Unchained Soul of Disaster. Link summoning with your monster and their monster to create one of your Unchained Souls. Because all of these cards share similar abilities to summon Unchained Soul of Disaster from their deck, there are a lot of different combinations that can get you there. For example, either of the Unchained Twins and any of these 4 cards allows you to summon Unchained Soul of Disaster straight from your deck. Once you've made your first Link summon, the next few will follow very naturally from it. Unchained Soul of Rage, your Link 2 monster, during your opponent's turn can target one of their special summon monsters and let you Link summon a Dark monster, using it and your opponent's monster. Those two together make Unchained Soul of Anguish, which back during your turn can target any face-up monster your opponent controls, and then after the effect resolves, Link summon a Dark Link monster using both it and your opponent's targeted monster. From there, you can get to a Link 4 monster, which could be any Dark Link 4 monster, but the Unchained theme has its own in Unchained Abomination, a monster that you can theoretically use in any deck since materials are just 2+ monsters, including a Link monster. This is a card that adds on destruction to destruction and just never really stops. But it's a little more controlled than other Dark Link 4 monsters like Topologic Bomber Dragon. You get a choice of when you want to destroy things, when you don't want to destroy things. And you can set up your deck to take advantage of its unique abilities. And of course, you should always keep in mind that you can summon any Dark Link monster. It doesn't have to be Unchained Abomination. You could get that Topologic Bomber Dragon if you wanted to. Or instead of Unchained Soul of Anguish, you could come up with something else that's pretty good to summon on your opponent's turn, like Nightmare Unicorn. IP Masquerade is already very good at it, but with Unchained Soul of Rage, you're not just summoning it on your opponent's turn, you're taking their monster on their own turn and using it to summon your Nightmare Unicorn still on their turn, which you can then use to disrupt their strategy further. To get your Unchained strategy running efficiently, there are 2 things that you need to be able to do. The first is being able to summon Unchained Soul of Disaster from your deck at will. This is because Unchained Soul of Rage and Unchained Soul of Anguish both require an Unchained Soul monster as one of their materials. So even if you can't absorb one of your opponent's monsters at the time, for example if you're going first, as long as you could get Unchained Soul of Rage on the field, you could then start absorbing your monsters from their turn. The simplest way to get Unchained Soul of Disaster out of your deck is by destroying one of the 4 Unchained Spell or Trap cards, or I should say, Spell and Trap cards for the Unchained deck. Each of these has an ability that's useful on its own, but you can also just destroy it while face down. Abomination's Prison being one of the most useful because it can substitute for any number of other cards, being able to add any Unchained card from your deck to your hand, including the other Spell and Trap cards. Now, I mentioned the Unchained Twins before. Aruha can be special summoned from your hand by destroying a card you control, and Rakia can, as a quick effect, just destroy any card you control. Note, however, that your special summons for the rest of the turn are locked into Fiends if you do this, so make sure to plan your deck around it accordingly. Now, outside of the Unchained cards, there are all sorts of good things that you can use to destroy your own cards. The most popular of which, I would assume, would be Dragonic Diagram. Long considered a staple of the true Draco strategy, these 2 strategies can blend together very well since they both have spell and trap cards that give you abilities when they're destroyed and sent to the graveyard. The Dragonic Diagram could, for example, destroy Wailing of the Unchained Souls while it's face down and replace it with a true Draco spell or trap card, all while special summoning Unchained Soul of Disaster from your deck. And because the abilities to tribute summon obviously aren't special summons, you can still use your abilities from True Draco Heritage or Disciples of the True Draco Phoenix to get an extra summon to summon a True Draco monster in the same turn that you've done this. As for adjusting the number of monsters on your opponent's field, one of the most popular ways to do this in the entire game right now is Nibiru the Primal Being. You can always give your opponent a special summon monster if you special summoned it yourself with Nibiru. And if you're playing Nibiru in the first place, well, your opponent's only going to have 1. So it's very easy to set up for a future turn by having Unchained Soul of Disaster absorb the token, and then summoning Unchained Soul of Rage, which you can then use on your opponent's following turn. And of course, Nibiru sticks around on your field when you do this, so you've got an extra 3,000 damage on your side. For an option that can both adjust the number of monsters on your opponent's field and destroy your own cards at the same time, you might want to consider a card like Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. Interrupted Kaiju Slumber plus one of the two twins puts a monster on both sides of the field, since both players get a kaiju, and it's a special summon monster as well. At the same time, you're going to trigger your own Unchained Twin effect and get Unchained Soul of Disaster out of the deck, so that you can just absorb that kaiju right away for one of your Unchained Soul Link monsters. It's also worth noting that as long as you're not targeting a Link monster your opponent controls, Unchained Soul of Disaster can be used to summon IP Masquerena herself. So even if your opponent tries to get away with not summoning any monsters so that you can't absorb them, you can still use one of yours, with IP Masquerena's ability to summon Nightmare Unicorn during their turn and bump back a Stellar Trap card. At its core, Unchained is something of a reactive strategy. Your opponent needs to have a monster on the field, and a lot of times that monster needs to be a special summoned one, namely if you want to absorb it with Unchained Soul of Rage. Now the good thing is that Unchained is actually pretty small. You have a lot of space in this deck. Abomination's Prison, being able to search for any Unchained card, gives you a lot of extra copies of cards that you might not want to play a whole lot of. For example, you only ever really need to play one copy of Wailing of the Unchained, since you can only use each of its effects once per turn. So being able to search that out when you need it leaves a lot of space left in your deck that you might otherwise be having a second or third copy of Wailing of the Unchained Soul. Whatever complementary strategies you choose should help you shore up your ability to summon Unchained Soul of Disaster from the deck, help you out when you're going first and your opponent doesn't have any monsters, and try to extend the variety of different plays you use. After all, if any deck just does the same thing over and over again, the opponent will eventually adapt. The ability to unleash a strategy that attacks your opponent from a different angle can really knock them off balance, and just ruin their ability to adapt to your game plan. Now, we spoke already about Dragonic Diagram. True Draco is a great example of a deck that you can mix together with Unchained for some good results. I like Kaiju as well, because you get access to Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which is good in this case not just as a removal card, but also as something that advances your own strategy. If we're talking about Fiends and things that you can special summon while you're using the effects of your Unchained Twins, I like Evil Eye. Things like Cerziel, Evil Eye of Selene can give you even more ways to remove your opponent's monsters. And actually, I really like Gorgon, Empress of the Evil Eye in this deck as well. It's got an ability to negate your opponent's monster effects, which is something that the Evil Eye deck itself kind of lacks. But it also has an ability that lets you destroy one of your own Unchained Twins if you put it beneath her after she uses her monster negating ability. If you're looking for a slim package of cards that's time and tournament tested, you could always go with Artifact Sanctum and Artifact Sight. And all you really need to commit to in your main deck is at least 2 copies of Artifact Sanctum and 1 copy of Artifact Sight. Of course, you could also attack from a completely different angle and make use of the fact that Unchained Soul of Disaster itself is a level 8 monster by pairing it with other powerful level 8 monsters. You can go with the Dangers, for example, but the one I like the most right now is Gizmek Orochi, the Serpentron Sky Slasher. As a free special summon, you have to banish the top 8 cards of your deck face down, but that's even less costly than Pot of Desires, and it's another way that you can play during your opponent's turn. For example, you could pass your first turn, make your opponent think that you have a weak hand, but then you could bust out Nibiru on their turn and also Gizmek Orochi, and just annihilate them in one turn when your turn rolls back around. The two together can also make you some rank 8 Seas monsters, which are some of the most powerful in the game right now. Unchained is a powerful and devious strategy introduced in Chaos Impact. There are a lot of different ways you can play with it, and a lot of different cards that it works well with. And I'm excited to see what you come up with in the weeks to come. Now that Chaos Impact has released, I hope everybody's enjoying it, and I'll see you next time.